I'm here with Elizabeth Dias, an award-winning correspondent from Time covering religion and politics. She has interviewed the Dalai Lama, traveled with Pope Francis aboard the papal plane, and reported on global policy stories from Sudan to Cuba. Her first book, What Did Jesus Ask?, is an all-new collection of modern meditations on Christ's questions of faith. Elizabeth also served as a featured speaker at the inaugural Frederick Buechner Writers' Workshop at Princeton Theological Seminary. Thank you, Elizabeth, for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
As you know, Frederick Buechner will soon be turning 90 years old. Is there anything you would like to wish him for this great milestone?
I really just want to say thank you. I think I'm one of the many people who Mr. Buechner probably doesn't even know has read all of his work and has really appreciated his influence and insight. And I just think there are so many of us who have a deep gratitude and spirit of thanksgiving when it comes to him. So thank you, Fred, for your life of witness and all the gifts of your writing to so many.
Well, thank you, Elizabeth. I'm sure Mr. Buechner will greatly appreciate hearing from you. Next, can you tell me how you first learned about his work?
I first learned of Mr. Buechner's work as a freshman at Wheaton College in Illinois. I was starting to study theology, and I was taking a class with Dr. Jerry Root, who is a big fan of Mr. Buechner's work, and he had us all read the gospel as tragedy, comedy, and fairy tale. And it was we were reading all sorts of other kinds of theology, historical theology, systematics, etc. And there was something so special about that sweet book that helped me, I think for one of the first times, really think about integrating my life with Christianity and the Christian tradition. And so it was a really special moment because it was pretty simple. And I think is helpful because of how imaginative it was and how personal it was. A lot of theological concepts can be so big and foreign a lot of the time, and that book was really meaningful.
That's great. What would you say attracts you the most about Mr. Buechner's writing?
I think it's that spirit, that imaginative, very faithful but very imaginative and very real spirit about his writing. I love the idea of truth-telling, and he's written telling secrets, and that theme of what does it mean to be a truth teller is very prominent throughout a lot of his work, and especially in combination with a lot of his sort of spiritual autobiography. That as a journalist, that's and someone who covers religion often, that's something that I'm looking for in people that I interview. Where and how does faith and spirituality fit within their own views of the world and how they live their lives, and how does that shape them? And Mr. Buechner has really embodied that and lived into that in a very special way.
That's great. Thank you. How would you say Mr. Buechner's writing has influenced your life and your career?
Well, again, it's that idea of truth-telling and being someone who tells the truth. There's a quote of his that I think about sometimes, that it's, at what points do my deepest talents and my deepest gladness meet the world's deep need? And so if I think about my role as a writer and what service that is for others, that's something that really resonates with me. And of course, I have also thought about, who is coming after him? Who do I need to be paying attention to, and who are writers and thinkers who are shaping American Christianity, world Christianity going forward? And so, his work directly influenced a cover that Time did a couple of years ago about Barbara Brown Taylor. We said that she is in his tradition and really carrying part of that legacy forward.
Yes, that was a wonderful article about Barbara, and we all really appreciated that very much. And thank you for featuring her that way, which I totally agree with you was much
Hmm.
deserved and also followed very much in Fred's footsteps.
Hmm. Yes, yeah, it was definitely in his footsteps.
Of his various books, which would you say has meant the most to you?
Well, I think probably the sacred journey, the idea of one's own spiritual autobiography, and how that listening to one's own story and how it intersects the rest of the other stories all around you. I think that's been really meaningful for me. And he had a quote in there. My assumption is that the story of any one of us is in some ways the measure of the story of all of us. And I think about that when I'm writing. Sometimes we look for stories to write about as journalists that aren't being told and that are sort of at the fringe. And yet those stories also, if you dig deep and really listen, say something about oneself and about one's community. And there's so many points of connection there, and with the divine and with the spiritual, with the culture, with other people that uh, are really valuable when you sort of tune into that. And he did that really well. He really set an example through that book.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that's very foundational for even his own writing too.
Mm-hmm.
So, more broadly speaking, what influence would you say that Mr. Buechner has had on Christianity and the world at large?
Mm-hmm. It's a really big question. Mr. Buechner is absolutely foundational this last century, for what Christian thought, what spiritual thought, what human thought really is and has been. And I mean, I know Time Magazine has featured him, and we were always reviewing his books along the way. I mean, he's just a really foundational figure. I'm really interested in what he's meant for a new generation going forward. And I mean, I remember when, as a student, not that long ago at Wheaton College, his work was read, and it was, I don't think I was alone in realizing that we, many of us could, in my generation, could really step into a tradition that he has tended and cared for decades. And it's a really special thing to have that going forward. And so I know that I'm not alone in really appreciating and valuing his work in my generation.
So, I realize this next question is a little challenging, but if you were to sum up Fred and his writing in a few words, what would you say?
That's hard. The word that comes to mind actually is brave. Um, of course, imaginative and thoughtful and deep, but it takes a very solid dose of bravery to step into the spaces that he has, with his own story, his own life, and to press forward. I mean, being a writer isn't easy. They say that um, if you're a writer when it's really hard to write, and so I can only imagine that he's had some of those moments, and stepping into those spaces is no small thing. So I would say brave.
That's wonderful. So, before we conclude, Elizabeth, is there anything else that you'd like to pass along?
Uh, just happy birthday, happy 90th, and thank you, Mr. Buechner.
Well, thank you so much, Elizabeth. We really appreciate you taking the time to be with us today.
My
Take care.
pleasure. Thank you.